please state your name?
Robin Rollins.
What is your connection to tonight's panel discussion and our showcase, Living on Roosevelt Island, What Matters in the End?
Well, I've been a resident of Roosevelt Island for about 6 years, and I'm a nurse practitioner at Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. Been a nurse for greater than 20 years. I was asked to come and speak about my experiences as a palliative care nurse practitioner and my training as a doula, and how we can reimagine end-of-life care and support for people, specifically on Roosevelt Island.
I think a lot of people might not be familiar with what exactly is a doula, death doula, and relationship to end of life. Could you just speak a little bit more about that?
So similar to a birth doula, an end-of-life doula is somebody, or a doula is somebody who just is there to provide support to the person who's going through the experience, birth or death, and help the person to navigate and to define what the experience should be like for them in a very individual manner.
And is this something that happens in a hospital-based setting or within the community, in someone's home? Like, where would that take place?
It can take place anywhere. Many hospices have doula programs. Very often it happens in a home. Patients who are diagnosed with a potentially life-ending disease, that might be the time that they might first seek out doula support.
And part of the context of this evening, particularly the panel discussion, was clinicians discussing end-of-life care in a racially and religiously diverse city. And could you speak to the way race intersects with the conversation on end-of-life?
Absolutely. So, we know that we probably do not have enough representation within the medical field of a variety of different ethnicities and racial backgrounds. And so definitely interactions with patients can often be complicated or not as robust as they should be or could be if, in fact, a clinician was of the same race or ethnicity or religious background as their patient. There are many people who are very interested in learning about different people's experiences, but what we know is that probably patients who do not necessarily identify with their providers may not also be able to share in the same way that they might with somebody of their same background.
And do you feel like this is something that you see improving?
I think within the medical profession, perhaps there's more discussion for sure about cultural sensitivity. I think this is going to be definitely a community-based movement, patient-driven movement. In the current climate, we all know that many things are going to really need to be identified by individuals and communities. And the way that we're going to address these type of issues is really going to be very interesting to see. This is, in a way, a very dynamic and exciting time for us to kind of develop new ways of addressing health disparities in our country by lay people, non-medical people, so to speak, kind of becoming more educated and more knowledgeable about end of life, and just the whole healthcare continuum is going to be really what's going to be, I believe, the driving force in terms of turning the tide.
And even from your personal experience as an African American woman and or as a clinician, do you feel like there are ways in which there are holistic practices happening within the African American community that are more holistic, that are not necessarily made legible in like academic or formalized medical journal circles?
Yeah.
That could be streamlined into the hospital-based practice.
Again, I think it's going to take those of us African Americans and other ethnicities, Hispanic Americans, to become more involved, to be more nurses, more physicians, more social workers, practitioners who are in the hospitals, but also in the communities and in homes, and educating people about what resources are available. In the African American community, it's more likely that families are more likely to feel that we will take care of our own. And so the knowledge base about hospice services, not hospice as a place, but hospice services, and educating people about what is in a sense their right and their ability to kind of access these kind of services is going to be key.
My name is Rogelio Henry, aka DJ Roger Smith.
And what is your connection to today's programming, Reimagine End of Life on Roosevelt Island?
Me and my co-worker, Treasure Empire. We was doing a workshop about morbid, not really morbid, about how we deal with death through music.
Could you give a few more details about the workshop that you led earlier this afternoon?
Yeah, we had about 15 kids come in to the workshop to learn about how us black people deal with music and deal with death through different types of music, different genres, not necessarily one. And today we designed a workshop to speak to the kids, understand where they come from when they going through the transitions of death, and not only death but emotions. Period, because all of that is full circle. Today, what we did is we taught them how to write lyrics and produce their own song through the web app named Soundtrap. Yeah, Soundtrap is a free web-based application that you could use to do music production. And the kids got in tune pretty quick. They enjoyed the program, and they asked us before we left, "Are we doing it every Sunday?" So I know that we touched the kids in that way. Anything else?
So could you explain a little bit about, first of all, when you say kids, like what age group do you think this started?
We had kids age range from 9 to 18. No, 19. Noel was 19. And they all understood what we was doing.
That was what I was hoping you could elaborate on a little bit more in terms of, like, I think when people think of the theme, Reimagining End of Life, that they think about this something that more correlates to, say, like a senior population or people who are dealing with chronic illness. Like, what for you, how do you feel like you guys presented it, or what did you see as the connection for teenagers specifically around this topic? And, like, how do you feel like music spoke to that?
How the kids reacted to it was when we spoke to them during the introductory. We spoke to them and asked them what songs correlate to them and they pass out their ancestors, or not necessarily an ancestor, somebody close to them. And this one girl said, "Before I Let Go." And "Before I Let Go," the song is an uplifting song, but she said every time that she listened to that song, she's celebrating her grandfather's life. And to hear that and hear her say such an old song, I always thought of "Before I Let Go" by Frankie Beverly as a barbecue song that you only hear at barbecues. So for her to have that insight of, this is a song that correlates to me and my grandfather, that was one person who grasped the aspect of how you could use music to get past or celebrate somebody's life instead of just thinking about death only.
Can you please state your name?
Yes. Hi, my name is Dr. Beauty Fremantle Beasley.
And can you please state what is your connection between yourself and tonight's event, Living on Roosevelt Island, What Matters in the End?
Yes, today I am here as a part of the panel, and I am a resident here on Roosevelt Island. I am an acupuncturist and have a acupuncture practice here on Roosevelt Island.
And part of the context for tonight's panel discussion is how does end of life intersect with race and religion in such a diverse city. Could you speak a little bit about how you feel race intersects with discussions on end of life?
Okay, in terms of the end of life, I think that culturally we all have differences, especially here in New York City. Many different cultures handle a death in different ways. And so I think that being able to speak to that helps each other communicate at the end of times and through the transition, as well as understanding each other, even if death is not imminent at that moment.
And could you also talk a little bit, as a holistic practitioner, what do you feel like you bring to the table in terms of helping people through either the grieving and bereavement process or through themselves confronting that they are at the end of their lives? How do you feel that your particular practice of acupuncture or holistic medicine in general kind of addresses that?
I think that overall, acupuncture and holistic medicine helps to look at the beginning, the middle, and the end stages of life because it's a transitional medicine. It's not dealing with one particular population, it deals with all populations. And so I do not per se have patients who are at the end of their lives, but the transition of life is what holistic medicine speaks to or focuses on.
Can I just show you when you get stuck? Hey, how are you? No, please do. Yes, the more you dig down, the more points you get. I used to be quite good at this, but I haven't been. I'll show you. Once you'll see what happens.
Welcome to Living on Roosevelt Island, What Matters in the End, part of Reimagine End of Life, a week of exploring death and celebrating life at more than 300 events across New York City. This is a community-driven initiative sparked by Reimagine, a new nonprofit organization whose purpose is to host a public conversation that transforms our approach to life. Your support in the form of your presence, your participation, your feedback, and your donations helps make this week possible. We have memory boxes that I believe Brianna from the Main Street Wire is passing out. As a thank you, Reimagine has created this special takeaway for each of you, designed to save memories and spark new thoughts and conversations. Please take one and spend some time with it this week and beyond. And now, to set the stage for the program you're here to experience, there is a short reading before every Reimagine event that is meant to connect us all to one another. If you wish, you can close your eyes as I reread Reimagine's 2018 intention. Why are we here? It's a big question about life and about death. Perhaps we start a little smaller and first ask instead, why are we here in this place together right now? We're here to create a brave space. We're here to explore big questions with a shared spirit of curiosity, humility, and empathy. We're here in community. None of us is alone, and together we can help inspire one another, ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities to engage in meaningful conversations about living and dying well. We're here to reimagine end of life, to envision a world in which we are all able to reflect on why we're here, to prepare for a time when we won't be, and to live fully right up until the end. We're here. All right, and thank you, everyone. If you know me, you might know that I have ADHD and I'm a little disorganized, so I've actually written my introduction on 3 different platforms. So bear with me as I share this. My name is Jay Khadija Abdurrahman. I'm a lifelong resident of Roosevelt Island and a single parent of 5 children. I helped organize the Reimagine End of Life Roosevelt Island programming on behalf of Word to Our Ride, a nascent oral history library, docu-series, and host of events that aim to catalyze critical discussions around race, disability, gender, with the goal of imagining a more inclusive future for our neighborhood. This day-long series of events, from 3 creative workshops in the afternoon, theater, teen digital music, sculpture, and the panel discussion and art showcase this evening at Kohler Hospital, took a village. I'm deeply grateful to the 9 community-based organizations, 3 teaching artists, and 4 clinicians featured on this evening's panel discussion for taking time out of their lives to make this idea become a reality. Earlier this year, I read a piece by a woman named Abebe Berhane called Why Descartes is Wrong. And it was exploring the idea of, if you're familiar with the phrase, I think, therefore I am. And she was trying to look at it from more of an African perspective. One of the things that it explores is John and Biti. I am because we are, and since we are, therefore I am. And here I am before you as a member of this community and as a member of this island, but I would not be if it wasn't for this community. So I just want to take a moment to ask each of the panelists, the moderator, everybody who representing the community-based organizations to please stand. Robin Duell-Rawlings, Mary Schoen, Beauty Fremantle, Dr. Ravinder Rahim, Tom Heyer from Gallery Riva, Sunshine Martin, who facilitated the sculpture workshop, Brianna Worsing from the Main Street Wire, Esther from Gallery Rita, Andy Engel from Reimagine, Tahan Parikh from Cornell Tech for Making the City Class, DJ RS, Rogelio Smith from the Digital Music Workshop today at Cornell Tech, Vince from Open Doors, Tito here too, and Tito from the Open Doors Collective, they were special guests in the music workshop. And unfortunately, there was a couple people who couldn't make it with us today. One is Christy Towie, who wasn't feeling well from the Main Street Theater and Dance Alliance, but she was a very big help with what happened today. Nikki Leopold from Island Kids, and Treasure Empire, who also helped DJ RS. So my personal connection with the topic Reimagine End of Life is through grief. When we think about death, we often are referring to an unfortunate event that happened to a specific individual. But when we think about funerals, it is really about how the living cope with that loss, how their lives are impacted moving forward. I've spent the last 5 years learning about adverse childhood experiences, also known as ACEs or trauma. I have seen how grief can shape a child's whole developmental trajectory, the way sorrow hangs on shoulders like so many crosses. In modern Western society, most people live alone or in single-generation homes for the first time in human history. I've been thinking about how many of us are separated from the dying process, from the earth, separated from each other, from our bodies, from our culture, and ourselves. So in the process of thinking about what the project Word to Our Eye is doing and catalyzing critical discussions, I've really been thinking about how being is an event, and we really can't talk about what kind of life we want to lead in static or in isolation. It's only in this moment in dialogue with one another that we can really bring that to fruition. I'm going to share with you a little bit of my stream of conscious reflections and leading up to this event. The illusion of individualism is this notion that as atomized particles in an otherwise disparate whole allows us to conceive of death as something sad and unfortunate for those other people to have been impacted by, a pathology to be measured, delayed, conceived, managed by professionals or in isolation, not as conceived by indigenous societies or epistemic embraces of interdependence that deem death as a part of the rhythm or life cycle of a people that dwell on this land. Death is something that will come for all of us, whether we like it or not, whether we name it or not. Sometimes it's quick, sudden, or anticipated, or long and drawn out through the course of a degenerative disorder like Lou Gehrig syndrome that took my aunt Umi Kulsum slowly from Goldwater Hospital. Sometimes, though, death does not come all at once. It just lingers in the doorway, reminding us of how fragile and insubstantial our bodies, or these bodies that we have, are. And I've been thinking about how funerals are for the living, how eulogies are to integrate the memory of this person we have lost into who we are now, to help make some sense of what has happened and what we will do. So one of the things that I wanted to take this moment to do is to acknowledge people that as a community and as a society we have recently lost. And I'm gonna read their names, and I would appreciate if you, the audience, can say Ashe. Can you guys say Ashe? Ashe. This is a Yoruba word that talks about kind of like our life substance and the continuity between beings and the earth that we inhabit. And it's also similar to the idea of like Amen, and I named it. So Kofi Annan, who was a resident of Roosevelt Island and we lost this year, Ashe. Umi Kulsum, my aunt that I lost in Goldwater, Ashe. Eric Garner. Trayvon Martin. The 11 people that we lost at the Tree of Life Synagogue in Pittsburgh due to an act of anti-Semitism and terrorism yesterday. Amen. For our ancestors that lived on this ground before this hospital was built. Amen. Thank you. And with that, I just wanted to leave you with one last thought. There were so many things that this topic brought up for me, and in some like Google black hole, I landed in this concept from the Aboriginal people in Australia called songlines. And they have these maps, they're like visualizations of oral histories where people would learn how to navigate the earth around them through stories that were passed down over thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And they have a few sayings from them that I was thinking we could hold on to as we proceed into this event. One is, we don't own the land owns us. The land is my mother is the land. Land is the starting point to where it all began. It's like picking up a piece of dirt and saying, this is where I started, this is where I go. The land is our food, culture, and identity. We don't have boundaries like fences as farmers do. We have spiritual connections. And with that, I just want to give you guys a layout for the itinerary of the event. I'm very excited. We have an amazing panel of clinicians here that are going to talk about end-of-life care in a racially and religiously diverse city. We're going to showcase art that was developed earlier in 3 different workshops. And just first, I'm going to bring up my friend, an amazing DJ who led the workshop today at Cornell Tech, Rogelio Smith. Thanks. So I just want to say, RS is amazing because he led the afternoon workshop for 3 hours today at Cornell Tech after DJing all night last night, and now I dragged him to this evening today. So he's just going to say a few words before he has to go.
Hello, how y'all doing? All right, my workshop is called They Live in the Songs. It was basically a workshop teaching African American youth that you could mourn different ways through different songs. You don't have to always have a sad song. You could listen or you could create your own song. What I say about music is you don't feel music, music feel you. So when you listen to songs with somebody that you knew that passed away, you always remember the good when you hear those songs. And one of the students said that she had this song named Before I Let Go by Frankie Beverly. To us black people, that's a barbecue song. Like a barbecue party, that's a song that you play during the barbecue. But when she said it, that every time she listens to that song, she reminds herself of her grandfather. And that surprised me because she's 14. That song is older than me by far. And I grew up listening to that song. What this meant for me was we don't normally know how to deal with a lot of things. Depression, we suffer with that, most of us, and we don't know how to express that. And we was basically teaching the teens, not even the teens, they was like 9 through 19, that it's okay. You can listen to something, you can make something, create something to make you feel better. And I think we succeeded because at the end, they asked if we doing this every week. So, and ending with that, Reimagine, I love what y'all doing with the community. Y'all not only touching one type of person, you're touching all types of people all through the city. And hopefully I can work with y'all more. And thank you, Khadija. I'm sorry, I'm tired.
All right, thank you. So I'm about to call our panelists up to the stage, and before I introduce our first panelist, I do want to say that the common thread through the 4 events that we had today is Kohler Hospital, and I feel like I've recently became really close friends with particularly the members of Open Doors on an island where there's not a lot of programming. They have a radio station, a spoken word collective, they do outreach to youth. There are videographers, graphic designers, amazing people who have not been stopped by the fact that they've been victims of gun violence or have had some type of disease, illness, or encounter that has impacted their ability to live independently or need to be in a wheelchair. And really, I feel like we have so much to learn from them because there's something about being in a wheelchair or being disabled that you immediately confront, like the fragility of the human body, and you think about the way that the earth is set up and whether or not that you have access. And I really just want to acknowledge and make sure that we're centered around the experience of Kohler Hospital. And I always do forget one person. It's usually a really important person. And I just want to thank Jovi May Santos, who is from the Kohler Therapeutics and Recreation Department. It's a big, big part of this. So the first panelist that I would like to come up is Dr. Ravindra Amin. He is a board-certified geriatric psychiatrist who has been chief of psychiatry at Kohler since 2009. Passionate about the well-being of the older people and with a deep interest in memory disorders and end-of-life care, he has been a psychiatrist in nursing homes for 22 years. He trained at Mount Sinai Hospital, New York. He's a faculty member at NYU Medical Center, where he mentors geriatric psychiatric fellows.
Do I start?
Yeah, you want to
Wonderful.
Go.
No, this is fine. I'm good standing. Thank you so much, everyone, for making time to come here. I'm very excited to share some things with you. In turn, I'm more excited to hear things back from others who are here today. Where do we come from with medicine and medical people's experience with life more recently? So the recent history, if I go a little bit as far back as maybe 1800s, in not even just at the end of turn of the century, 1800s, beginning 1900, life expectancy in the United States was 47 years. Today, it is touching 78, 80 years, small differences between different ethnic groups, men, women, but altogether, if we just take a look at from 47, just about a little over 100 years ago, now we're touching 80. How did that happen? Some big landmark medical things that happened. Antibiotics. Alexander Fleming, the British scientist, came up with first antibiotic penicillin in the late 1920s. Shortly following that, antibiotics became pretty much the mainstay to treat infection, making a huge stride in keeping people alive and totally, fully bringing their lives back. Then we learned to use vaccines. Another British scientist, Edward Jenner, who boldly did some experiments coming up with vaccine for smallpox. And now we know there are many more vaccines. Huge contributors to changing, adding years to our lives. It did. Much more recently, we know what happened with the HIV epidemic. In its early years, once the disease came about, there was a tremendous sense of hopelessness. We knew how to take care of bacterial infections. We didn't think we know how to deal with HIV infections. We thought big swaths of the society will be wiped out. It didn't happen. Now, we look around, we pretty much would probably be coming in contact with somebody who's living with HIV without we even being aware of it, because they're living a life just as good as they ever were capable of doing. There are still some diseases that we're struggling with internationally. Malaria, we're not able to get a good handle on. Tuberculosis, many strides having made, but not a good control. Well, hopefully we'll get there. But some other diseases we thought we really cannot do anything about. We've come great at levels with that as well. Consider this heart disease. Fewer people are dying entirely from heart disease. We can transplant a heart and a person has life. That was unthinkable a century ago. Cancer. After heart disease, we thought cancer is something that we really don't have cures for it. Now, there are myriad cancers. We actually have pretty good treatments for it. Do we not know some people who live with dialysis, having lost both their kidneys, and they have pretty good quality of life and length of life? So, against that, let me tell a medical story. Nancy Cruzan was a 25-year-old in 1983, came down in a car accident. She got revived by medical people. 3 weeks later, she was declared to be living in vegetative state. This landmark case opened up a lot of issues and dialogues about what death means to us, what life in that zone between fully alive to fully passing, what does that mean to us? From 1983 until 1990, much controversy went on. Nancy's parents were vehemently asking the hospital to please take things off her and let her go. Hospital did not agree. Court in the state of Missouri, it didn't resolve. Finally, Supreme Court determined this. No, Constitution does not give you a right to die. That generated a dialogue which opened this area of what now we call advance directives. People can still take charge of their life. How do they want to live? So now, if we haven't done it, I would wish we all go home with at least one thing. Have we taken care of our advanced directives? If not, think about it. New York State has a wonderful website that gives pretty detailed and easy to use information. So this is where we are. Range of medical interventions that now we have, extremely fancy, very complicated, and certainly what we have managed to do is this. We positively, significantly have added years to life. Now, what we are struggling with is this. Have we always added life to years? So that's what my today's question is. That's a question that I have often pondered in my head, and we've often discussed it on the front line where patient care happens. Medical treatments, as they happen, what we frequently encounter is this. It has pushed the humanity out of the patient's room. More patients are dying in the hospitals, and more often than not, without having a good control over how they would have liked to see that happen. So that's a question. So my imagination in reimagining death is this. Can we bring life back and humanity back in that phase of time when person is in the final stage of the journey towards getting to the next phase of whatever that happens beyond death? Different cultures have different interpretations and different meanings about what death is and what life is and what that transition means. An interdisciplinary dialogue is what my thinking is, that in my imagination I wish we would have more of it to think of what is the meaning of life. Which is one of the big reasons I'm so excited that this group and Reimagine platform is actually generating that interdisciplinary dialogue. Medical field, yes, opening up and helping people think about themselves is one thing. What else other aspects of the society can do? Yes, can laws be clarified better so that we go beyond? Yes, thank you. So this is the dialogue that I wait to hear, and I think we'll continue this dialogue beyond today's event. And thank you so much, Khadija, and everyone else for organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is Robin Rollins-Duell. She is a nurse practitioner in supportive care at Memorial Sloan Kettering Cancer Center. She provides palliative management in an outpatient setting while making referrals to hospice when necessary. Death doula training she received in 2017 from the International End of Life Doula Association has enriched and informed her practice. Her perspective is the involvement of patients in charting their course with the support of clinicians, family, and community who honor their wishes is key.
Thank you, everybody. Good evening. So I come to this very excited also, as was shared, about this whole experience happening throughout the week and the conversation being started and continuing on. I've been a nurse for more than 20 years. I won't say how many years, but more than 20 years. And the whole course of my career has been in cancer care. And I, in a sense, been a palliative care nurse because I think of cancer care as palliative care, which really means that you're controlling symptoms and working with patients as they're going through their whole course from diagnosis to end of life. All throughout my career, I've always kind of struggled with a kind of what I call medicalization of care of patients throughout cancer and other illnesses. We have a lot of different remedies, I'll say, for pain management or management of other symptoms that are very important, and depending on what the aim of the person is, it's important to kind of address those things, and we've made a lot of great kind of advances in our country and in the world. Sometimes I wish, though, that, and I'm concerned that we left people behind as we're making some of our advances. We have a big focus on patienthood and oftentimes leave persons behind. We struggle, I think, in this country to talk about just using the word death to talk about something that ultimately we're all going to face. And certainly when somebody is dealing with a life-ending disease, you would think that that would be a time when we maybe perhaps would be a little bit more at ease about talking about these types of things. But I think what maybe comes to the forefront more often than not is people's fears during that time of life. I think of death really as life, and the types of things that inform people about how they want to die really are very much wedded into their values and what's important to them. And these are things that we all have lived with all our lives, and so it's interesting to me now that we are starting to, I think, begin to talk about how people have lived their lives and how that should inform their deaths, which really comes down to the types of plans that people can make and how we actually dignify the process and dignify our lives and show respect to one another and kind of live within this world of many different types of people. So being a nurse for 25 years, I've been in a very, again, medicalized kind of society and have struggled at different points in time in my career to kind of integrate alternative kind of modalities such as aromatherapy or green medicine. It was mentioned that I went through doula training last year also because I felt that even though I was able to care and I felt well for patients, it always felt as if there was something a little bit missing that I wasn't offering my patients. And even as a medical professional, finding the language often to bring out in people or helping them to express what their thoughts and wishes are and who they really are as people throughout their lives, and again, how that will inform their deaths. It was always difficult to find the language to help people to kind of identify who they are. So I went through the doula training, which I found very informative, and actually one of my colleagues, a person who I went through the training with is here, and we were talking about the fact that then how do you integrate this into your day-to-day, into what you do on a regular basis? And I have found ways in my practice. Should I make it shorter? Okay, so I found ways, which I'll share later. The last thing that I would just share, though, which I think is equally important, is that we all have a role that we can play within ourselves in terms of identifying who we are, what's valuable to us throughout our lives, the people we love in our communities, our families, and kind of bringing that into our interactions with each other. And so I hope we can explore a little bit more as a community how we can bring that to the fore to kind of create a kind of a model for how we can, kind of support each other through the process.
Thank you so much, Robin. Thank you for your patience, guys. I just want to be mindful of everyone's time. 1 second. So next, I would like to introduce Beauty Fremantle. She is a licensed acupuncturist operating a private practice on Roosevelt Island. After experiencing the traumatic transition of her mother due to acquired immune deficiency syndrome, or AIDS, and assuming primary healthcare responsibility for her paraplegic father, she felt compelled to answer a lifelong calling of serving and assisting others toward their individual quest toward wellness. She currently holds a doctorate in acupuncture and Eastern medicine from Pacific College of Oriental Medicine and received a psychology BA from the City College of New York.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to thank the RI Word Project, Word to RI Project, as well as the Reimagine Project and organization, and thank everyone for being here. I'm really honored that Khadija asked me to be a part of this as well. When thinking of death within this project, I was thinking of my father. My father was the reason why I went into acupuncture in the first place. He had transitioned over 12 years ago, and I was his primary caretaker. And he had suffered a stroke. And acupuncture was one of the things that helped him to get past the paralysis of his left arm. And so I, at that time, was studying psychology and thought, okay, how can I include this medicine as in addition to psychology and help with him in his care. And so that was one of the main things that was a motivation for me to go into acupuncture. Many people ask me, do you really needle people for a living? And I mean, that's primarily what I do in addition to many other modalities. I really do needle people. And there's an entire science behind it, and it's thousands of years old. According to ancient texts, it was used in 100 BC. It then went on to Japan and Korea and many of the other Eastern countries, and was used primarily from that time and continues to be used in the hospitals in China along with Western medicine. Here in the United States, it was not used up until the early 1900s, and then not included into hospitals until the 1990s. It's really only become popular. In the 1970s, there was a editor of the New York Times who went to China, and he became very sick. I'll share that story. He became very sick. He had to have a surgery of his appendix. And after the surgery, he was in extreme pain because of the surgery. So he had a doctor of acupuncture come to treat him with 3 needles and moxibustion, which is a warming technique. This technique and treatment caused the pain to be alleviated, and he didn't have this pain anymore, and he was able to go on with his editorial work with the Nixon administration. His name was James Reston. And so that was one of the stories that ended up in the New York Times, and many people then started to hear a lot more about acupuncture. It then became very popular in pockets in the United States. And one of them also was Lincoln Hospital right here in New York City in the Bronx. It was being used for addiction, alcohol and drug addiction. And there was, many of you may know him. He is, his name is Mutulu Shakur, and he is Tupac Shakur's father. And he was a doctor of acupuncture as well. And he would work with another doctor there at Lincoln Hospital to establish a detox center. And it was heavily used to treat heroin addiction, and it helped a lot. Well, at that time, the resources were not there and weren't available, so it could not continue on up until the 1990s, and it's still there at Lincoln Hospital, or part of the hospital in the Bronx. So acupuncture, I can continue on. I probably don't have much time, but it's very beneficial for so many different conditions, and is being used in hospitals, Stanford, Johns Hopkins, UCLA, many different hospitals, and can be helped to, as we look at the end of life, it can be helped in transition. We all, as has been mentioned, are in the process of soon. Every single one of us will pass. The thing is, can we ease ourselves in that process, depending, no matter where we are in our lives, and that is what it's mostly good for, as well as me wanting to say, lastly, is this brings me full circle, because in the mid 1980s, my father was here. As a resident, he had been stabbed and was paralyzed, as Khadijah had mentioned earlier. And he was here from the mid-1980s to the early 1990s. And so I'm grateful to be here, grateful for the project and every single one of you also being a part of it. So thank you very much.
So a lot of information. Is everybody still here with us? Yeah. All right, this is a really important part of the community, so I hope that this will not be your last time in Kohler Hospital or other places similar. One of the first nurse practitioners to work in the MP-led survivorship program, and ran an independent prostate cancer active surveillance clinic, which included performing prostate biopsies before transitioning to palliative medicine in 2017. The most meaningful aspect of supportive care is the privilege of working with seriously ill patients and being able to provide them with some type of relief for their pain and suffering.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. So for this next portion of the presentation, I'm going to be asking the panel a few different questions, and then we're going to open it up to you as the audience to also answer some questions, to ask some questions. So I thought for my first question, we could go. Dr. Ravi had talked about a little bit about advanced directives, and although we could talk a little bit about advanced directives. So advanced directives is a way for a person to take care of his or her family if a crisis happens and the person is unable to speak for themselves. It can include designating a person that you want to make these decisions for you. It can be that you can help determine the medical treatment that you may or may not want. How comfortable do you want to be at the end of life? Instructions on life-sustaining treatments such as being on a respirator, having CPR performed, and also what would you want to be your organ donation wishes. So for the panel, you each work in different settings, and considering the differences among your different types of clients, what do you think your patients' or clients' attitudes are about advanced directives?
Well, I think a big job is for the providers to give good, clear information to the patients. Once that is given, it is quite amazing how many people are actually able to think through clearly. Talking about being ill at a time when I'm in good health is not easy to imagine for everyone. This is where I think it is an art in the hand of providers to really facilitate that process for an individual to think so. Doesn't happen in one conversation, but keeping an ongoing conversation. But when that is done well by an enlightened provider, it actually is a process that is quite easy.
You know, it's interesting. I guess I have an interesting perspective on advanced directives. I will share that there's a private nonprofit organization called Aging with Dignity, which puts out, it's international. It really leads a bit of a discussion internationally about how people die and kind of safeguarding dignity with decision making. And it's has put out something called 5 Wishes, which is something that's been used around the globe, which asks people to begin to think about their values and what their belief systems are so that they can begin to have conversations about their wishes. And I would agree, something very important to happen well before somebody is at a critical state in their illness. You know, to bring up the discussion often at a critical time can be very difficult, and sometimes it's kind of mired by people's suffering. And so if somebody is having excessive suffering, whether it's physical or existential, they might not be able to make decisions that are in keeping with what their values are and their belief systems. So I agree. I think it's very important that these conversations happen very early, and that we as a community and as a society get more comfortable with talking about these types of things. And often it's just a matter of talking about values and beliefs, and then there can be an easier segue into discussing, that your values and beliefs are going to be what informs your values and beliefs at the time of your death.
So in terms of advanced directives, I think that it is important to look at how you want to have your end of care, your end of life care. That is really important. And so, like for instance, with my father, he was not prepared for this. He was not ready to discuss this at all. And any time that I wanted to discuss it with him, he kind of shunned it. He was a Caribbean black man and very strong-willed and thought he was invincible and nothing would ever happen. And so I think when I think of it for myself and for my family, I think that it's really important to look at exactly what are your wishes overall and your care.
Thank you. The research does show that there is a big difference in advance directives, that many Hispanic and African Americans do not have, not as many have advance directives compared to their white counterparts. And I was wondering if any of the panelists had any thoughts about what is the reason for this difference.
I definitely think that it is to your point, Beauty, I think it is a cultural thing. I think oftentimes different cultures have different approaches to death and dying. I think in the African American community, you might hear someone say that we take care of our own. And so having a clinician talk about, what do you want us to do for you? Maybe it's sometimes the framework of how things are presented. And so I think we all need to be sensitive to, and I struggle with this all the time, and I've been doing it for a long time, but have to stop and think about who this person is, and maybe even presenting it as, what do you want? And what are your needs, as opposed to what I'm going to do for you. I think that culturally, we have to appreciate that just cultures are different and then individuals are different, and really be very, very respectful of maintaining dignity and kind of respecting people's wishes and desires.
I believe these differences in the rates in advance directives are probably parallel with the differences in overall health indices among these different cultural groups, as some ethnic groups tend to receive care for anything later in the stage of the disease. So my thinking is that the probable causes contributing to the differences are the same as the causes for the differences in their health in general.
Okay, so I'm going to move on to another question. Uncontrolled pain is many people's fear when they think about end of life. And I was wondering, how do each of you address pain for your clients when they are at the end of life?
Well, thankfully, this process now we call under different names. Sometimes we call it comfort care or palliative care. And there is also just very formalized entities of care provision called hospice care. Under, I think, these areas, when people are in this area of care, certainly they have received much better comfort care overall, where they have better sense of satisfaction about their care. And I think it certainly is up to the institutions and care providers and policy makers to begin to adopt these policies. Thankfully, Kohler has it, and we've made some strides. Or I think everyone needs to do that.
So it'd be very unusual for someone to be dying in severe pain at the end of life.
Absolutely. I think that will be a shame for us to find somebody dying in severe pain at the end of their life. Mm-hmm. And pain, not just physical. Yeah. Physical, social, spiritual, psychological, I think all forms of pain, we do have mechanisms to address it, and it will be a shame for us to not offer it.
Right. I'm happy to hear that that's the experience at Kohler. I think that is so essential. I think it kind of flavors how people die and what their decisions are at the end of life. Again, I think if somebody's suffering with pain, then they might be more apt to want to end their lives. And what is very important is to make sure that any kind of suffering that people are experiencing is taken care of. I do think that there is a disproportionate amount of people who don't have access to good symptom management, pain management. It might be, and I do think it definitely is socioeconomic, racial, and has all the kind of trappings that we have in our society in terms of access to these services. And so I do think, unfortunately, many people do die in suffering, in pain, with unrelieved symptoms. And in this country, where we have so much access to so many things, I think that makes it even more of a crime.
So with acupuncture, it's extremely effective for pain. It's one of the most studied conditions, any type of pain. So it is really effective whether you are, at the end of life or at any other stage of life. So it actually is even better along with other forms of medicine. It can be used with any other sort of therapy, physical therapy or chiropractic therapy, and it can enhance and cause a relief of pain as well. So.
I was going to just add to what Beauty said. I think it's so important for collaboration because we've met and we've talked about how it's so important to kind of, again, meet people where they're at and kind of instituting all different types of modalities like acupuncture. I have many patients who ask me about medical marijuana now. I prescribe a lot of opioids, and so just kind of being educated about it and collaborating and being advocates for loved ones and for yourselves, I think it's very important.
That actually brings me to another question. What are your thoughts about medical marijuana as far as helping control symptoms like nausea, pain from cancer, insomnia?
I don't think we should hold any bars when it comes to providing comfort to somebody is in the final stage of their life. So medically, there's plenty of evidence now. And so there's, again, one more modality. There is no reason for us to hold it back.
I agree 100%. I actually, in my institution, we're trying to figure out how we want to roll out our recommendations. And what I often will bring to the group is, it's here. So it's time to just get educated about what people are using, what the best ways people can use it for different symptom management, and just kind of get on board and kind of be educated about it and very compassionate about it.
I would agree with both Dr. Ravi and Deb. And I would say that marijuana has always been used, and before, this trend of researching and looking at it, it has always been used for pain and other conditions. So my grandmother, Jamaican, family, my grandmother used marijuana, drank it as a tea. She didn't smoke it, but she used it up into her 90s. So I would definitely say that it should not, as Dr. Ravi said, be limited. It shouldn't be in terms of comfort of care. So I would agree.
But while we talk about medical marijuana, I must add a footnote to that, which is this. I am a physician and I'm not an activist. With that, what I really am referring to is non-methodical use of marijuana in general in the hands of untrained users and family treating family is quite dangerous, especially now that on the street, when we have things called marijuana, and then there is synthetic marijuana and a range of products which are out there, which are seriously medically dangerous. So I don't think this dialogue should ever happen without also talking about all the risks associated with risk to public health.
Mm-hmm. That's true. That's a good point. And then I'm going to just ask one more question, and then I'm going to open up to the audience for questions. How would each of you define what dying well means to you? How would you define dying well?
I would say that dying well starts today. Dying well starts with making plans and making decisions to not only focus on your death per se, but focusing on how to live life the best that you can right now, and how to connect with your family, get support, whether it is like a community like Roosevelt Island, which has a strong community connection, even in having this event. So it all starts with how we connect with each other, treat each other, respect each other and our families, as well as taking care of ourselves and using preventative care if we can, and whatever it is, whatever else it is that we need to have in order to prepare for our end of life.
I go back to the doula training actually that I went through, and what was one of the best part of it perhaps for me was the fact that you had to delve into who you were, because I think that's instrumental in then talking to someone else about themselves. And part of the plan is making a vigil plan that actually lays out exactly what your thoughts are, the environment, who you want there, and and again, I think it all goes back to who you are as a person and valuing yourself. The other part that I think about a good death is having shared with your loved ones, because a huge gift is to be able to have stated and give a blueprint for your loved ones as to what is going to be key for you transitioning for your death. It can be very burdensome for families that are left, or loved ones, not knowing what the person wants. So a good death to me would be following my vigil. I won't bore you all with what my vigil was, but also just enlightening those who are around me and who support me.
Dying well to me means living well. Living well with full vitality, where I remain actively engaged in my pursuits and being the best I can be. And one day I'm gone.
Very nice. So I'm going to open it up now to questions in the audience.
Thank you. This is very interesting. I'm a geriatric care manager. My name is Ellen. I've been doing this for about 35 years, and I've seen thousands of people deal with the end of their life. Most of them live at home. And what I've seen, I try to help people live as well as possible into their ripe old ages and die with dignity and die well. But as often as that happens, they also end up in the hospital, and family have to make decisions about whether to pull the plug in a respirator, whether to go on a respirator in the first place, whether to have a feeding tube put in, whether, there's so many questions that a healthcare proxy can answer and people need to think about ahead of time. Can you shed some light on some of those questions? And how does how do family members, how do you make a healthcare proxy, which is an advance directive that the hospitals listen to or want to have? How do you make that healthcare proxy be as general as possible, but yet have the family understand what their loved ones' needs and expectations are, and be flexible with them if they change their mind at the last minute?
I think most decision when it comes to healthcare, except for emergencies, are rarely need to be made on the spot. So I think the key part is really a dialogue and getting a good facilitation of partnership between the providers and the decision makers. In the same spectrum of your question, one thing that all healthcare providers, Kohler including, go through is, what if when a person does not have advanced directives and now there is a question that is befallen upon them and it's a critical decision, and what will that be processed if that person didn't have advanced care directives and now the person lacks the capacity to make those decisions? Not a most comfortable position to be in. Again, this is one of the areas, perhaps pretty substantially new in its recognition and study and publication, is where Kohler has done. Just as recently, New York State Bar Association's journal is publishing work done at Kohler, which talks about how to address the needs of unbefriended individuals, and different processes involved in it are significant review of ethical principles. But I think if we don't have that, the biggest thing that I see is before the emergencies happen, do the dialogue and let it carry and be patient and do a process.
I guess I would also add that, like, a healthcare proxy is a person that you've designated who you should have spoken to, hopefully, about your wishes and desires, so that in the absence of you being able to make a decision in the heat of a moment or for some unexpected circumstance, knows you well enough who can speak to it. So I guess to me it all circles back to how do we start to engage in these conversations and make it normal amongst ourselves about what's important to us and what we consider to be quality of life. I have people who will tell me I want to be completely out of pain, and if that means I can't be conversant with a family member, then that's what I need, right? And so you've kind of established a little bit about that person. And then there are other people who would rather have more pain but be able to be conversant. I'm just mentioning that to talk about some values that people have in terms of what's important to them. And I think we can be generic. And I guess to me, at my institution at Memorial, 21 years ago, we talked about the minute somebody came into the hospital for an admission, they needed to have a healthcare proxy signed. Fast forward to 21 years now, and we're still talking about it, about how do you make sure everybody has a healthcare proxy. They've had a conversation, not always without issues, but that they have at some point in time designated a person who they have been able to share some of their desires with as a starting point.
I would agree as well that with having a health proxy is most important, as I had mentioned earlier, support and communicating with your families. So, or whoever else you have in your life to discuss exactly what it is that you want to happen at the end of the life. It's very important to have. So, I personally, I do not work in that type of practice, but I did personally go through my experience with my father, and I was his health proxy. And so I, even though we had not talked about it earlier, had come up the end of his life, and it was time to discuss it. And it was very quick, and we didn't have much time. And so I think that just being straight and direct with whomever you may choose to be your health proxy is important. He wasn't, but my experience is that it's best to do so that way.
And then there's also these different organizations. You had talked about Robin had mentioned the 4 wishes. That really does help to create an open dialogue. You know, exactly what do you want to happen at the end? How comfortable do you want to be at the end? What would you really, what do you really desire at the end? And there, in your, the memory box, there are different questions that you can even be asking your loved ones, your family members, that really helps to prompt the conversation about what do you want to happen at the end.
Excuse me.
Yes.
What you talking about when you deceased?
No, before you're, the healthcare proxy would be, what would you like to happen before you die? How would you like to die? How do you want to live at the end?
I don't think you have too much choice in that, man. If you die, you mean you want to? What if a person ain't got nobody to help?
If they don't have anyone to help them? That's a very good question. Emily, was there that organization that you want to talk about? Yeah.
No, I don't see, because me, I'm covered. I got Medicare, Blue and White, I got all that.
Yeah.
Which I know I got people that are concerned about me.
Okay.
But it's other issues need to be, how would I say it? It's a lot more than just when you die. What about the issues when you're in here?
Exactly.
And you need certain things and don't nothing happen. Okay?
Yeah.
And I know, I've been on 7 years, and I know everything. A lot of things went wrong, and I don't think none of it was too good. You know, which it shouldn't have never happened. And I got it down. You know, I'm writing about it. not in a nursing home.
Yeah.
You're supposed to get care in there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. Mm-hmm.
And I ain't never been in there. This is the first time. And hopefully that lasts. You know.
Yeah.
But you talking about somebody dying, people need help while they living. I'm quite sure a lot of people want to get their own apartment. I'm from Florida. Paraplegics riding around in vans, got their own cribs.
Right.
Got jobs and stuff. You don't get this kind of stuff in here. You just do get physical therapy.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of issues that need to be taken care of.
To help you live.
No, really. Yep, you gonna live. You understand? So when it's time for you to die, God got to say so. Nobody else ain't gonna stop that. It means if you got somebody to bury you, then the state got to handle that. See, because I'm quite sure a lot of people don't have insurance like that, because I worked all my life. But I got caught up on 67. And I got daughters 45 and 41, sons too. But I ain't got no problem with getting in connect with them. And I'm quite sure I'm insured.
I think what you're talking about is exactly the point. You're right. When you're dead, when you're gone, when you die, right? We're dead. But I think we're also talking about what's important to you. What I hear you talking about are things that may or may not be acceptable based on who you are as an individual. And that's what people have to honor and listen to and dignify. At the end is the end. But I think we're talking about also having conversation about what's important to you as the gentleman you are. What is meaningful to you in your life? The end is the end. I hear what you're saying, right? Once you're past. But I guess I always hope that people have an avenue to express who they are as individuals, because we're all different. We all come from different experiences, right? And so being able to give voice to who you are and the values you have, and your end is the end, but on your terms, I think is, to me, very key.
This is a starting point, especially here in the community. If you feel like as if there are needs here, along with Dr. Ravi and the program, there are things that can be discussed as well. As far as me, Dr. Beauty Fremantle, I was saying Dr. Ravi. And so this is a starting point as well. And coming into Kohler. Kohler is a part of the community here on Roosevelt Island. So it is something that I'm sure that can be discussed in further.
It's private, but when you have something to do with the city house, don't it? I think so. And the city has some involvement too. See, because it used to be, at one time, when I first came in, this was Kohler until they took the other one down, and then they combined it.
Goldwater and Kohler.
Okay, yeah. But Henry J, he pulled a lot, And he got his certain people. And I don't know, I think he don't exist for this no more. This is cold.
Yeah.
Somebody else wants to ask one more question?
Yeah, okay. And it's two of them now. I'm through with it. You go ahead.
What do you recommend people do when their insurance is not allowing them to do what they'd like to do versus what they, and let's say their insurance is restricting them from doing what they want to do, and they have this fight with the insurance company versus maybe having to take on a certain level of debt to be able to live the way they want to live at the end of life? What do you recommend people do when they get caught in between what they'd like to do and what insurance will allow them to do?
I mean, it's a huge social economic issue. You're right, Lynn. I mean, even what this gentleman is talking about, we talk about individual desires and values, etc. And I don't mean it as flowery words in some ways, right? Because they're kind of like your desire, but then where where it hits the road is, do you have access to it? Do you know how to gain access to it? Those are larger socioeconomic issues that even this forum, though, begins to bring these kind of things up and has to be part of the discussion about who knows about hospice, who gets services, who goes here, who goes there. You're right, it's definitely an issue.
Certainly, healthcare providers find themselves often caught between what patients want and what the payers want to pay for it, which unfortunately become arbitrary, additional, extraneous factors which influence the process. I don't have a good solution for it. When it happens, it doesn't feel good to anyone, and struggling with it until issues are ironed out. And I think different scenarios fall out different ways, and there are different outcomes. This is a huge dialogue, I guess, with multiple other considerations.
Yeah, and we've even, at Memorial, we're finding that it's been very, very difficult even prescribing opioid medications for patients. Because of the huge opioid crisis, the insurance companies limit us to how much we can prescribe. They limit us to exactly what we can prescribe. It's always a huge, huge fight with the insurance company. So it is actually, because of insurance, it is becoming a bit more difficult to really do what we want to do and what the patient wants us to do.
There are so many different insurance issues. Yeah, there are issues with the provider and patient's insurance plans. And so what I find myself doing is telling patients to speak directly to their insurance company first. You can, if you are paying market insurance, you can get those types of plans. You can change your plan, or try to find another way. That's just one of the things that I suggest. But then also, it depends on the provider that you're speaking with directly and what your circumstances are. Everyone has different situations. And so I think that it's always best to speak to the insurance company and the providers that you're working directly with.
Actually, also a call to activism, quite frankly, because this is not your situation, your situation, your situation, my situation, etc., is too commonplace. And I think oftentimes we feel isolated having to figure it out ourselves, but everybody is affected to one degree or another. And it really is a call to some sort of activism about changing the system, which is about voting and a whole lot of other things.
Yes, that is very important. Get out and vote. It's crucial. It really is. I'm so sorry, but that was our last question. Okay, we can have one more question. I think I'm sorry, you were raising your hand?
My family knows this. They agree with it. They all feel the same way about themselves. I don't want to live if I'm going to be a severe burden to my family. I don't want to live if there is my life is not going to be meaningful or fun or enjoyable or anything else, if I'm just existing. If for some reason I'm already in the hospital for something and a breathing tube has been put in temporarily or whatever, can doctors, without fear of, and if doctors know how I feel and how my family feels, can they do anything to end my life with a shot, which is what the vet did to my dog, or with taking out? They did take out a breathing tube of my mother's when she had no chance whatsoever of leading a meaningful life. I always wondered about that. Mm-hmm. Can doctors do anything? Will doctors do anything about that actively to end your life?
Are you talking about physician-assisted suicide?
I guess
Euthanasia?
so.
So
either that, I don't know what to call it. I mean, once you're already in the hospital, are they allowed to take out a breathing tube? Are they allowed to give you a shot, which would be doctor-assisted suicide? I don't know.
No.
Go ahead, Rob. No, that's right.
No, it's interesting, because I think there's so many fears, and this speaks to the fact of how important it is for us to speak like this and educate one another and speak to our providers about, what are my expectations and letting them know. No, they cannot legally, without speaking to a proxy or without, some other ethical or ethics kind of discussion, just discontinue life support. It doesn't happen. That your wishes were to have it removed?
Yes.
Then
Well-
they would.
If you have spoken to your proxy and you said, my wish, I not want to be on a breathing machine, I don't want to be in a breathing machine, then the proxy would talk to your physician and explain that you no longer want to be on the breathing machine.
Actually, now that you have stated this, if you're saying this is my wish, and we have the recording of it, we actually have a clear and convincing evidence of your wishes, which certainly could be used as an evidence of what your wishes were. And if you had said, put me on a ventilator temporarily for taking care of any of my issues which were reversible, but once you have stated that, but if I arrive at no more quality of life, please take my ventilator off. Now we have good mechanisms to do so. And this indeed is happening. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
They can then remove it if it's very clear that those have been my desires all along. It was only temporarily. And if the temporarily doesn't work, a doctor could remove it.
Yes, as long as they know that was your wish,
That
they
is
would remove it. The other thing is like when you were talking about people no longer having meaning in their life, that is the whole purpose of having palliative care involved. Palliative care works closely with people to help them spiritually, to help them with their existential needs, physical needs, help with pain, fatigue, all of those things. So palliative care really is helping people to help them to die a good death.
I'm so excited that you guys want to keep talking about this. And really that's what all the discussions that we're starting, we really want people to come away with that feeling that they just don't want to stop. We have some amazing art showcase that we're also going to continue on to. I'm going to allow 2 people to make a 1-minute comment that they're going to keep so brief. And because I think that it's really important to the conversation. So first I'm going to let Iris speak real quick.
I was speaking about my husband was connected to the machine because when he got into to the last stage, nobody was there, so they put him on the breathing machine. I wanted him out because the blood and everything was coming out, all out of him. I couldn't take disconnected. I had to go to court, get the judge to give me a signed paper so I could go back to the hospital to disconnect him from the machine. That's what I had to go through with the situation of connecting him to the machine when you don't want to. That's what I wanted to say.
Thank you.
I wanted to come back, actually, Jill, to what you were saying. There's, I think, a really big ethical difference between removing an apparatus that's being used for life support when the patient doesn't want it, and then what you're talking about with like a shot or medically assisted death. There are, I think, at least a handful of states that have right to die or death with dignity, where you can actually, depending on the condition, speak to your physician about receiving medicine that will facilitate ending your life. That is not something we have in New York State, as far as I know. And I don't know where the debate stands on that. That was going to be my question, but we can talk about it afterwards. But I do think there's a really big, to ask doctors, there's a really big ethical difference between the removal of a tube that's unwanted and then an active work tube.
Thank you for that brief clarification. Where?
All right, so can we please have a round of applause for Dr. Amin, Robin Rollins-Dwell, Beauty Fremantle, and Mary Schoen? All right, thank you. All right, y'all still here with us? Yes? My son said no. So I know this is really heavy conversation, and I just want to point out that if you look at the teaching artists who led the workshops this afternoon, or the clinicians on the panel, I want you to see that we really tried to address this question of reimagining end of life and life and death questions from a racially, religiously diverse point of view. This was an acupuncturist, a clinical psychologist, and 2 nurse practitioners. I hope that whoever comes up on the stage today, that you see someone, whether it's a neighbor or whether it's a medical professional or an artist, that you would feel comfortable going to with your biggest and deepest questions, with your fears and with your confusion and with your anxiety. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us live on Roosevelt Island. I hope someone today you can now see on the street and recognize. And I want you to know that the way that community starts is right now by building these connections that was talked about, like in the song lines with the Aboriginal people. Let's build these connections. And with that, I want to introduce Fariso Jordan, who led the theater workshop this afternoon at the Main Street Theater and Dance Alliance. Fariso Jordan is a millennial who is avidly interested in the condition of the world. An actress and playwright, her most prominent work, Georgia, is an off-Broadway play exploring opposing perspectives on sexual consent, including the perspectives of a young man. She is the founder and director of Setting the Stage, a theater-based college preparation program for high school students from underserved backgrounds. Fariso uses her zeal for the arts as a tool for social advocacy, serving as an advocate and educator to promote issues for women, girls, people of color, people with developmental disabilities, and people who are incarcerated. And with that, Fariso Jordan.
Awesome. Thank you. Hi, guys. Thank you, Khadija. So yeah, I led a writing and acting workshop today addressing these questions of end of life. And so what we did is we started kind of with like an acting exercise, examining the stages of grief. And then we kind of like reimagined what grief could look like instead of the traditional stages of grief. And then we went into some improv, and through that improv workshop, we asked the question, what are some of the things that we would do differently if we knew that our time was short? And so each participant, they made a list of things, and then we used those activities that each individual came up with, and we used those as the prompt to do improvisation. So we did acting scenes with these prompts. And I just wanted to read some of the prompts that some of the people came up with. There were so many. I'm just gonna read a few. So we have, say I love you more. Call my sisters every day. Say what's on my mind, speak my truth and not hold back. Relax. Laugh. Travel the world, care more, give more, listen more, honor God, quit my jobs and write a book, work intentionally on improving my relationship with my parents, don't leave debt behind for loved ones. Awesome. So now we're gonna go into a few performances. Also, we did some writing prompts on monologue work, poems. Khadija, are you gonna do something?
Yes, I'll go last.
Yes. Okay. So I'm gonna do something that I wrote regarding my mother, and then we have another person, Jorge, who's gonna do a piece, and then Khadija will go. Sayings by my mommy, Dr. Sunny Lee Kapungu Maswaswe. On life, you told me, a B in school deserves a beating. Failure is not an option. Never start at a deficit. I am the exception to every rule. I am the perfect child. Never make decisions based on money. Anything they can do, I can do better. And when I was afraid or shy about something, you would say, "Are you my child or what?" Take care of business, or the business will take care of you. When you cut corners, that's what you will end up with, corners. Your dreams can only come true if you wake up. If they think you're a punk, they'll get you. Let's give peace a chance. If it's not from God, it's not going to last. On October 2nd, 2012, you told me, there's this guy named Mitt Romney, and he's debating the president tomorrow. Have you heard of him? Do you know what's going on in this country, darling? I don't want you to wake up on November 6th and find out that Mitt is your new president and be like, wait, what happened to Obama? Register to vote. Your brutal honesty, anytime I performed, you would say, you need a new wardrobe. What's wrong with your hair? Your African accent sucks. The whole thing about having friends is that sometimes you offend them, sometimes you don't. You snooze, you lose. Your dreams can only come true if you wake up. On your Facebook post on March 24th, you wrote, I want the whole world to know the awesomeness that is Fariso Jordan is my child. On love, dating, and relationships, you told me, if you say yes, 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 he's gonna be like, no, no, no. Do not kiss frogs, because I am a princess. Find a man who loves you more than you love him. That is the only way it will work. You're always skinny when you have a boyfriend. You need a boyfriend. It is so unimaginable to me that I would ever go on a date with a guy and pay for anything. This whole Dutch thing, don't be stupid. That time I was like, well, maybe I should date online. And you were like, if I was your age and I had to date online, I would kill myself. We play a part in everything that happens to us. If he makes you smile and if he makes your heart beat fast, go after that. And if it doesn't work, then so what? In your passing, you have shown me to live fearlessly, unapologetically, to go after my dreams and make them a reality. Because now that I have experienced the worst through losing you, I am no longer scared of the worst. And if the worst happens through my pursuit of the best in the worst case scenario, being death, I would still end up being reunited with you. You are ever present, you cannot die, you are still alive, I can feel your spirit working through me, for me, and with me. Earlier this week, you visited my boyfriend's dreams, and you told him to take care of me and to put my boobs away. He described you as pleasant and comforting. By visiting his dreams, I hope that means that you're approving, even though yes, he and I met online. I hope that you'll visit me in my dreams tonight. Thank you. Coming to the stage will be Jorge.
Hi everyone, my name is Jorge. One of the first things, Farisa for inviting me for this. I'm not accustomed to this, I'm new to the game. I wanted to invite something to honor my older brother who passed 23 years ago. I just named it, his name was Nelson Edwin Rodriguez. Here it goes. He died a month and 4 days after my 18th birthday. It was Tuesday, November 17th, 1995. I just got home from school that afternoon too when I found out he died. His name was Nelson Edwin Rodriguez. He was 23 years old, and he was my older brother. Now, the further along I walked down our long hallway to the kitchen, I felt this dread come over me. And when I saw my mom hunched over herself, covering her face in the living room, I knew why it felt so dreary. My cousin walked away from my mom and came over to give me a hug. But at that moment, I did not want to be touched by her, my mom, or anyone. I felt this heat rise from inside me, as if my body was overworking to keep me calm. I felt all types of emotions right then and there, but I didn't want to come off like a bomb. I needed to be there for my mom. She was crushed, and I knew she was also hurt because I hardly visited him in the hospital. But how could I? That was my older brother, my mentor, my friend, and it was practically impossible. I went with the family that first night, and I hated what I saw. He looked so weak and fragile, and nothing like the person I knew before. Everyone was there trying to care for him, puffing up his pillow and adjusting the bed as he liked. And I, as I often do and still do when I'm confronted with real emotions, I cracked jokes the whole time. I was fat back then, so everything had to do with how good the food was and how the nurse should have bought 2 puddings. Everyone laughed, including my brother, and that was my contribution for the evening. Yet, the minute I left the room to the bathroom, I lost it going down the hospital corridor. I was doing all that crying where I couldn't control myself while staring at the newly polished floor. And that was the first and only time I visited my brother there. I couldn't step into another hospital for years afterwards because of that feeling of despair. But honestly, what was fucked up about that day, aside from the passing, was the fact that I planned to visit him that morning when I woke. I just had the suspicious feeling that this morning was coming to a close. And if I didn't see him before his departure, I would have choked on what I could have said and what I should have wrote. I wanted to remind him that last time of how important he was to me, how much I loved him, and how much he emotionally supported me. How he was the only person in my life that ever fucking got me, and I him. We were less like siblings and more like kindred spirits. His name was Nelson Edwin Rodriguez. He was 23 years old, and he was my older brother.
Just one more round of applause. Thank you so much, Jorge, because I know that Reimagine says let this be a brave space. And you take a risk when you come up here and you bare yourself, and I know I can see a lot of people really felt that. And so I realized that I might have been a little ambitious to organize 4 events on one day, and I really didn't have a lot of time to participate in most of them, but I'm so excited because I caught the last 15 minutes of Fariso's workshop, and she's just such a phenomenal teacher. She really created a space for me to write 4 pages of a piece, and the prompt was write a letter or write a monologue as if you are about to die, and what would you say? And so I am that anomaly in Western culture. I live in a 3-generation household with my mother, myself, my 5 children, in a 2-bedroom. So she often worries that I'm gonna die. If I have a cough, she's like, drink some orange juice. Nobody gonna take care of them kids. You better feel better. Go to bed. So we spend a lot of time thinking about what's gonna happen. Shout out to Malcolm, my babysitter. He make it happen. Lucy, who's not here right now, is also another member of my babysitting army, and I'm so happy that Sunshine, her daughter, and her mother are here to represent Iris. So this piece is dedicated to Keyshawn, who I dragged here and is falling asleep, and Jayla, who's in the back by the aquarium, my 2 oldest children. And this is something that I wrote as if I'm gonna die. This is what I would say to them. Brush your teeth. Make sure you lay your edges down. Don't walk outside crusty. Make sure you always wash your face and grease it down. Don't walk outside like no motherless child. Give me them hands. Let me kiss your fingers. 1 for each. Hold on to this love. Feel me squeezing your hands tight. I love you. Don't never forget, even when I'm not here with you. Hold on to that love. Remember how them squeezes feel. Sorry, hold on. I will not always be here with you, but you always got my love. I'm disappointed that I won't get to see you go to all them places, bust down them doors, and make people mad at how beautiful you are, just as you are. But you ain't never needed me to get there no how. Come real close, closer. I'm a whisper. Everything you ever needed to be you is now you. Don't never worry about whether you was good enough. You are beautiful, flawed, and infinite. You B'Tselem Elohim, created in the image of God. You are this land you occupy. This land is you. One day I'ma be in that dirt you walk on. And when you walk out this door after hearing I ain't here no more, you gonna cry loud and deep, and you gonna wonder how tomorrow gonna work out, cause I always been there. Your little brothers and sisters might forget who I am. Oh, well. It might be hard to keep telling them stories. Grieve how you need to. Grieve how long you need to. Remember, I love you. I'll hold your hand even when I ain't here no more. I'm scared because I don't know. I ain't never died before. But we will keep moving. We will keep going. It's okay to feel confused, afraid, and hopeless. But we're going to keep going. We're going to keep seeing another day. And just as you walk out this day today on this dirt, one day you're going to walk out and be grown just like I'm grown speaking here to you. And it's gonna be okay. We're gonna keep going. Y'all clapping, but if I die, my mother coming for you. I mean, everybody clap babysitting. All right, next to the stage, I would like to introduce Sunshine Martin. She is an Afro-Latinx BFA student at SUNY Purchase. Oh, thank you. Thank you, I appreciate it. Her work speaks on her experience as an Afro-Latina and the deconstruction of systematic racism and oppression. She is currently reconceptualizing Alice in Wonderland, experimenting with the idea of how stereotypes and negative connotations alter the character's appearance throughout the movie, challenging the ideas of mental health, innocence, and perception.
Hi, hello. I'm Sunshine. I want to thank everyone for sharing and for allowing me to be here. Khadijah, Reimagine Life, Riva, all that. It's a tough act to follow. It's okay. This won't make you guys cry. It's fine. So my workshop today, we focused on creating new languages around and surrounding death. Because not all languages are verbal, to be honest. There's physical languages, mental languages, and languages through art. And I wanted to really focus on how we really focus on death. Like, no one ever realizes how long we're thinking and we're contemplating and we're worried and we're just scared. Everyone's scared because it's unknown. It's on, like she said, you never died before. So like, it's unknown. So I really wanted to focus. Like, we had 3 hours from 12 to 3, and I wanted people to really work and really think of how death molds them as a person, how death holds them back, how death pushes them to do things, how death like just stops everything, because in your head, that's it. And a lot of people today, like, that came to the workshop use death, and I've noticed that through their work, they relate death with religion, with birth, with just all these things that if death is supposed to end everything, we have so many positive connotations to them. We have so many eye-opening conversations that we could be having, but since everybody's so scared to have these conversations, everyone's so overwhelmed and so afraid to say the wrong things at the wrong time, but maybe the wrong thing is the right thing to say at the right time. So like things like that is just necessary, and we need to have these conversations. And like I said, you don't need to say these things. You don't have to say, I need help right now, I'm scared. You don't have to do these things. You could go, and I really wanted people to discover art as a conversation, because you could go, you don't have to be an artist, you could go and make something and release it. For me, art is a release. It's a way of making people understand without having the words to explain them. And not everyone could sit here and write a book or a poem the way I could paint a picture. or the way I could mold some clay like we did today. So I really wanted to focus on that, and I'm really happy for anybody who came and who really enjoyed the project, because molding clay itself is tactile, it's physical, it's in front of you. It's something that a 3-year-old kid could do, a 6-year-old woman could do, like anything you could do. It's so like, and I kept it open-ended when we was working. I never said anything but explain it what death means to you. They were like, so what am I supposed to do? And I made sure everyone in my workshop went first. I didn't want to set a standard or level, and I wanted to get deeper than skulls and tombstones, and we definitely did, and I'm really proud of everyone who participated. And I really just want to like give some shout outs to my family for coming, because and like just like stuff like that, it's really like experimental. And I know I'm probably one of the youngest people, I am the youngest person to run a workshop today, and people are looking at me like, how can a 19-year-old girl tell me what life is about, what death is? And I'm not here to tell y'all that. I'm really not, because I've obviously experienced more, but I can tell you new ways to experience things, because we are living different lives and just living in different times and different moments. We have different experiences, and we could exchange those. And I'm really proud of everyone who experienced and shared today, because I've learned something. I hope everyone else learned something, and I want everyone to leave here feeling like they could express themselves differently through poems, dance, art, writing, anything. Because, like I said, not all languages are verbal. So thank you.
Sunshine Martin, she's 19 years old. And I just wanted to point out here, these are some of the sculptures that were made earlier today in the workshop. And so when we all break up, this would be a good place to come check that out. And just for the itinerary of the evening, as we begin to wrap up, I just wanted to share that first we're going to have a special guest featured from the Open Doors Poetry Collective out of Kohler Hospital. Then I'm going to have a little outro. We have one little breakout activity, and then I hope you take the time to connect with someone that you haven't met before here. All right, I would like to call to the stage Jay Molina.
My name is Jay. I'm part of Open Doors, part of a group called the Reality Poets. We do poetry, most of the time about things that happen to us through our struggles, being sick and being victims of gun violence and stuff like that. And this poem I wrote a couple of weeks ago, and it's called Life and Death, and it's actually something that happened to me. My heart stopped 3 times on the same night, and I was declared dead the first 2. I remember the first time it happened. I took my last breath in stride. Everything turned dark and quiet, no light or sound. I felt so peaceful, no more worries, no more material stuff, just me and my memories. Life and death are so different and similar at the same time. Life is the gift that God bestowed upon us from the beginning of time, letting us experience a beautiful life full of loved ones and the memories to remember them. We struggle to stay alive, to feed and clothe ourselves and our families, to live our lives according to God's will. A lot of people fear death, but we definitely shouldn't. Death is the price, the final resting place for our body and soul, the true haven. I know this because I experienced it. I lived it. I realized what the prophets were trying to teach us, not to fear death, but to welcome it instead. Life and death are part of God's plan, to work hard for what we want through our life, and then enjoy the peace and joy that death brings. Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Can we have one more round of applause for Jay Molina? So we started off the beginning with acknowledging some of the people we lost and saying Ashe. And now I would also like to wrap up by pouring libations. And so when I was preparing and organizing for this event, two of the songs that really stood out to me were Pouring Out a Little Liquor for My Dead Homies by Tupac Shakur and Scarface, When I Seen a Man Die. And then I went to Bread and Butter, a local, we don't have no corners in Roosevelt Island because it's on the street, but like a corner store. And I went and I bought what I thought was going to be a 40 ounce of Old English. And apparently I'm so old that it's a 42 ounce and it's a plastic bottle. I couldn't believe it. But if you're not familiar with the act of libation, for me, when I was growing up, I remembered I looked up to Tupac Shakur. I remember I was mourning when Biggie died. And I remember Puffy came out with that song, and my mother and I were in that Philly cheesesteak restaurant in Philly, and she was like, why is somebody rapping on a Sting record? And I was just like, it just really hurt my feelings. And I just felt like all these rappers, all my heroes were being denigrated, and I couldn't understand why. And as an adult, I really learned that this act of pouring out liquor for your dead homies traces all the way back from an act of libation that's recorded in the Bible, that's recorded in the Greek and Roman myths, that goes all the way back to a lot of West African and Yoruban societies, which were the origin of not all, but a huge percentage of African people that came through the Middle Passages into slavery in America. And when we think about memories and eulogies, and I really like what Sunshine said, there's all these conversations that happen that are nonverbal, all these ways that we remember where we came from and we remember our ancestors that have nothing to do with the words that we say and are just so deep into our genes. It's epigenetic. It's the way that we move, the way that we talk, the rhythm, the seasoning or the lack thereof. And I just, want to take out this moment to pour out some libation to some people that we've lost recently. Ooh, it's like soda. I'm gonna try. So to Ntozake Shanga, I'm scared of spilling the floor. To Anthony Bourdain, to Aretha Franklin, amen. To all the people who have lost their lives in Kola, to all the people that have occupied this land before us, to anyone that someone in this room right now has lost. Thank you, guys. That's it for my libation. So I just have a couple of things to say, and then we have a post-event activity. It all should take about 90 seconds. Bear with me. So one, like I said, there were 9 community-based organizations that came together to make this event a reality. Support your community, go to their website, sign up for their newsletters, give them some money if you got it. I just want to personally thank the Main Street Theater and Dance Alliance, the Main Street Wire, Kohler Therapeutics and Recreation Department, the Angelica Foundation, the Open Doors Collective, Island Kids, Tapan Parik's Remaking the City class at Cornell Tech, Fariso Jordan, Sunshine Martin, DJ Rogelio Smith, Treasure Empire, Robin Duell Rawlings, Mary Showen, Beauty Fremantle, Tapan Parik, Jovi May, Vince and Tito, who's not here at this moment, but performed in the hip hop workshop earlier in the day, Fariso Jordan, somebody I'm forgetting, somebody important forgetting. But this really is amazing. If you don't personally know me, I often spend a lot of time complaining about Roosevelt Island And this year, as I turn 30, I've really tried to make an effort to be the change that I want to see in the community instead of identifying what I don't like. And through that process, I've made so many amazing connections. Let's do this more often. Let's make it fun. You know, I really believe in what the Word to RI project is trying to do is let's break down the barriers between generations, between the academics and the community, between the hospital and the community. You know what I mean? Like, hang out with your doctors, hang out with your neighbors, have deep conversation. And with that, we had just had one post-event activity. And then I really, you know, Kohler donated munchies. Please eat some. And let's see, let me pull it up. Sorry. Before you leave, say hi to a stranger, share why you came, and one thing you'll take away from the experience. So let's keep it organic. You can move around, eat a brownie, but speak to someone you haven't spoken to before. Thank you.
And we were working together at our school about sparking conversations.
Oh, really? Okay, so you can. I came to support my daughter. That's my daughter. Yeah.
Whose birthday was it? It was her birthday. It was your birthday. Yeah. Your son came out with the dog too, right? Yeah. My grandfather lived on.
I really want to do it, and I did last year.